We're starting today Parak Yud Gimel of the story of the Tzivui and Kibush P'lishtim. Would like to go a little bit in depth into it. Let's read the psukim once again. V'Yeshua zokein bo bayomim, v'yomer Hashem elov ato zokanto boso bayomim ve'oretz nisharo arba mo'il rishto. Zois ha'oretz hanish ores kol glilus ha'plishtim v'chol ha'geshuri מן השיחור אשר על פני מצרים ועד גבול אקרוין צפוינו לכנעני תחושב 15 סרני פלישתים העזוסי והאשדודי האשקלוני הגיתי והאקרויני והאבים מתימון כל ארץ הכנעני מאור אשר לצידוני עד אפיקו עד גבול האמורי והאורץ הגיבלי וכל הלבוני מזרח השמש מבעל גוד תחס הר חרמון. כל יש ואומר הלבון המסרף ומצרים כל צידויים אנוכי הראשון מפני בני ישראל, רק הפילו לישראל ונחלו כאשר ציוויסיכו. So this is psukim when Yeshua is getting a tzivui to conquer and to capture the part of Eretz Yisrael which wasn't captured yet. And Rashi says, Anochi orishem acharei moischo hapilo liYisrael benachlo v'yichboish La'achar zman kol shevet v'shevet mashenofel b'goyrole. Basically, Yeshua is being told that he wasn't kovish entire Eretz Yisrael, but Kadosh Baruch Hu told him, you know, the parts of Eretz Yisrael which are not captured yet, but I'm asking you the goyrol, which we're soon going to deal with, which is going to make the partition of the different chalokim, chavolim of Eretz Yisrael to the shvatim, please do it now. Although part of those parcels, part of those shtochim will not be captured and conquered until after Mois Yeshua Binu. Now, the few first psukim are dealing really with the western part of Shevet Dan, because Orei Plishtim, which the pasuk says about them, Zois Ores Anish Eres, those are Orei Plishtim, which are in Chevel Shevet Dan. So I would like to know, what is the status of those Chevlei Eretz Plishtim, which were the nitztabed to be Yerush in the Zman of Yeshua, and actually they didn't conquer it till, we'll see soon, Sefer Shoftim, and thereafter, in the Zman of after Moshe Yeshua. So let's go back to the Torah. In the Torah we find twice. We find one time that Avraham Avinu makes a bris with Avimelech, Melech Glor. Steht in Pasuk. Vayibo Esai, Vayomer Avimelech ufichel sar tzvoel Avraham le'emoir, Elokim imcho b'chol asher ato eis. Ve'ato, Yishov oli be'Elokim, heino, we'll machen a shvur, I would like to make a shvur, im tishkoir li velenini ulenechdi, kachesed asher osisi imcho, tase imodi v'imoretz asher garto bo. Vayomer Avrom onoichi ishoveya. Zogt Rashi. What does that mean? Lenini ulenechdi. Ad kan rachamei ho'av ala ben. In other words, he's asking for 3 generations. As we say before, the pasuk, the word nin here means a son, as we state in Alam Meforshim. So I don't want you to conquer and to be kovish. This Eretz Plishtim, what I am dwelling, what I'm living in right now, not me, not my son, and not my Einikel. And Avraham makes a shvur. Later on, when Avimelech makes a bris with Yitzchak, and by the way, according to the Ramban, it wasn't the Avimelech, the Zelba Avimelech of Avraham. They used to call the same thing in Eretz Mitzrayim. They used to call Avimelech Parei. So the Plishtim used to call all the Melochim Avimelech. This is the son of the Avimelech, who was the one who made the bris, the pact, and the shvua with Avraham Avinu. So state, after, this is 40 years after the Krisas bris, the father is no longer alive. The new Melech Avimelech is making a bris and says, Vayomer ro'oi ro'inu ki hoi Hashem imoch, vanoimer tehino olo beinoisi uveinoiseinu, beineinu uveinecho v'nicho bris imoch. Zogt Rashi, Ti'ina Olo Beinosenu, Asher Binosenu Mimeo Vicho, Tia Gam Ato Beinenu. They're reinforcing the shvua. Say 40 years ago, your father and my father, okay, made a shvua. I would like to right now, you Yitzchak, you're the son, and I'm the son, as the Ramban say, would like to reinforce the shvua. There wasn't another bris. The Zelba bris, which Avram was kairos with Avimelech, the father, Yitzchak was kairos in order to be mechazik, to reinforce the initial bris, till the Doir Shlishi of Tzetzoy Avimelech, which is, this is the son, and his son thereafter. If I look later on in the Psukim in Perek Tesvav, here, state, at the end of Perek Tesvav, we're talking about the Milchama, when they actually go into the Milchama, state, Ve'esayevusi yoish ve'Yerushalayim, lo yochlu bnei Yehuda lo yirisham, vayeshev hayevusi es bnei Yehuda b'Yerushalayim ad hayoyim hazeh. Brings Rashi. Lo yochlu bnei Yehuda lo yirisham, shoninu besifri, Rabbi Shua ben Korcho Eimer Yecholim hoyu, ela shelo hoyu rashoyim machmas hashvua shenish ba'Avram la'Avimelech. Ve'yevusi ze lo yal shemo umo hoyo, elo migdal David shehoyo b'Yerushalayim, u'shmoy Yevus, uvnei oisa mechoyz P'lishtim hoyu, u'kshenkovshu bnei Yehuda es Yerushalayim lo hoyu rishu bnei oisa mechoyz. Rashi brings down the Sifri that, what does it mean, lo yochlu, wasn't physically unable to be kovish, but they weren't allowed. Why? Because machmas hashvua shenish ba'Avram la'Avimelech. Rashi adds on for the Sifri that this Yevusi, we know the Shiva Hamamim, one of them is the Yevusi. That's not Yene Yevusi. It's not. There was a Migdal, there was a tower in Yerushalayim. The tower was called Migdal Yevus, okay? And the Bnei Oisa Mochoiz, we should listen very carefully to this very, very fine words of Rashi. Bnei Oisa Mochoiz, the people who were living in that region, Hoyu, says Rashi, P'lishtim Hoyu. Ukshikovosh Bnei Yehuda Shal Lo Yirishu. In other words, we're coming in the time of Yeshua Binu, and we're coming right now into Yerushalayim, in the Zman right after the death of Yeshua Binun. Steht doch klar that the Neched of Avimelech, the Arichas Yomim Mishpachas Avimelech, steht Rishonim, the Neched of Avimelech was still alive at the time when Bnei Yehuda are going to conquer the Mechoiz, the Yevusi, which is the Migdal Yevusi, which in that area specifically, the Bnei Oisa Mechoiz was P'lishtim. So in other words, they cannot go ahead. We're not talking about by Chameshes or P'lishtim. We're talking about the Migdal Yevus, and apparently the proximity, the corporation limits of that Migdal, which was called Yevus and was inhabited by Bnei P'lishtim. This was not able machmas hashvua shenishbo Avram la'Avimelech. If I look in Sefer Shmuel Beis, I'm going to want to offer another explanation thereafter, but Levaila, I would like to learn al pi pshutei. If you go on the Sefer Shmuel Beis in Perek Hey, it says like this: Vayelech hamelech ve'anoshov Yerushalayim elei Yevusi yoshev ha'oretz. Vayomer leDavid lo yisovei eino ki mesircha ivrim ve'apischim le'emoyer lo yovei David heina. Says the Radak, and this is, it's not only the Radak, Rashi says it also, but the Radak says it more mefurish. I would like to quote the Radak. You remember that tower, the Migdal Yevus? They put two tzlomim. It was called Migdal Yevus, and the Migdal itself was called Tzinor, like a pipe. Vehoyo echod, they put two tzlomim. Vehoyo echod iver, one looked like a blind person. Vehoyo al shem Yitzchok. Vehoyo pisech al shem Yankev. And the other one in pisech. Ubefihem, they put into the mouth, psazah sort. Shailu, what it was, a kameya or something. Hashvur shenish ba'Avram la'Avimelech shenemar im tishcheli l'nino l'nechdi. Lefichoch loikovshu Yisrael kshekovshu Yerushalayim ki adayin hoyo neched Avimelech chai ubimei David kvar meis ubot lashvu. So Rashi makes a very Poshet, Radak, and Rashi, Sefer Shmuel, make a Poshet order. From the time of Avram and Yitzchok, Leninu Lenechti was still alive in the time of Yeshua, and they were still alive in Sefer Shoftim, where Bnei Yehuda actually conquered Yerushalayim, but as the Yevusi, that Migdal, that region, they didn't conquer. And where they put in Tzlomim Bereisha Migdal, and in that Tzlomim it always said, anybody wants to come close, Shail if it was Alpi Kishuv, or they had it settled in that. It's machlekes. Get one day to Sefer Shmuel, we'll see exactly what was. Balkoponi BePM was that Shmuel in Tishkali L'Neila L'Nechdi. So Rashi says, the Radak says, that Bisman Yeshua, which was right when they came into Eretz Yisrael, even Bnei Yehuda, right after the P'tir of Yeshua, this Einiko was still alive. Bisman David, Zogt Rashi, Bimei David, Zogt Radak, Kvamei Subot Lashua. So therefore David is going to capture this Migdal Hayevusi, this Tziner, because the Shvua is expired. Okay. The Gemara steht in Soite in Daftes. It's Shimshon HaGibor, okay, who lived 60-some years before David HaMelech. Okay. It says, Yochel, the word is Yochel, Lohishia es Yisrael, Omar Rav Chama Bar Chanine, Uchal Shvu Osoi Shel Avimelech, Diksiv in Tishkali L'Gino L'Nechdi, Zogt Rashi, Uchal Shvu Osoi Shel Avimelech, Botlo Loshen L'Yochel Dvori, L'Fishem Ovru Al Shvu Tchila. In other words, like this, Bizman Shimshon HaGibor, apparently the Einikel, according to this Rashi, was still alive, or according to this Sugis Agmor in Seite was alive, and therefore Me'ikar HaShvua, the Shvua was Chal, but it says Yochel, the reason why the Pasuk says Lagabe Shimshon, who fought with the P'lishtim, Lo Hishias Yisrael, and he killed the P'lishtim, as Mevur in Sefer Shoftim. Why? Because the Loshen, the Gemara says, the Loshen, says Rashi, Uchal Shvuasa Shel Avimelech. Rashi in Seita tells us, Miloshen Lo Yochel Devar. Shvua is Yochel Devar, not allowed to be Mechalel the Shvua. Lefi Shem Ovra L'Shvua Tchil. Keilu, the reason why Shimshon has a heter, although he's still not expired the Zman HaShvua of the Tzait of Tishka Lila Nila Nechdi, it's continuing. It's not only B'mei Avram v'Yitzchok, it's not only B'mei Yeshua and Shevet Yehuda, but even later on in the Tkufa of Shimshon, at the end of Tkufas HaShoftim, he's still alive, this Einikel, for whatever reason. He lived a couple of 100 years. And the only reason why Shimshon was allowed to fight with the P'lishtim was because Huchal Shvu also is Rashi Em Ovru Al A Shvu Tchila. Okay? Why doesn't say that Maharsha comes along after north and says, and I'm quoting Maharsha, V'hu yochel en lefoshu yaschil Yeshias Yisrael mi'at Plishtim, d'kvar ksi b'mei shoftim, v'aloya omer Hashem aloyim mitzrayim min Plishtim, v'tishelu elai, v'titzaku elai, v'yishia eschem miyetchem, v'al ken dorshu, shehuchlo. It doesn't still, the Maharsha says the reason why Yachel is Miloshen Chilalu es Hashvu and not Yachel means he's the first one, he initiated the fight against him. He says it's not true, because in the Zeiten of the Shoftim, in Sefer Shoftim, it says, Min ha-Plishtim v'titzaku v'oisha yosem etchem, we find the Plishtim throughout Sefer Shoftim. So the Maharsha, v'al ken dorshu shehuchlo shvu'oseh shel Avram b'yomov, כדכסיב גבי ובואיסו אי פלישתים מוישלים בישראל. אבל קודם זה, גם שהיו מצירים לישראל, כדמוכח בקרוב ואישי עשרה מיודום, מכל מקום לא היו מוישלים מהם כדרך העם. והשבוע הויסו, זאת דמר שו, שלא יהיו אחד מוישל על חברוי. וצורך לא אמר, דבאיסו זמן היונך דוי של אבימלך כיום, שהשבוע לא הויסו רק הנכדוי, וכן יראה פירש רש"י בפרק אל הטרפס, says the Maharsha like this. The truth of the matter is, if we look throughout history, the Plishtim made Tzaras to Klal Yisrael. But that's not Yochel as HaShavua, because the Shavua was a Shavua Shelo Yemoishel Echad B'Chaver. It's not going to be the ruler, the dictator. Stam Cheperai that doesn't break the Shavua. So he says, Be'emes Yeredarkoi, that the Zman of Nechdoi Shel Avimelech was still Kayim. And that's why Mi'ikar Adin, Shimshon couldn't have started up with them because there is no expiration, even in the time of Shimshon. It's Huchla Shvua because in that Kufa of Shimshon is the first time where the Shvua, the P'lishtim were Moishel and Klal Yisrael. Okay? But, what steht im Ansho? That the Shvua was a Shvua and Shelo Yimshelu Echod B'Chaveru and not Shelo Yatziku Echod B'Chaveru. Okay? Akopanim, but what steht doch to Klor in Rashi, and Marsho the way is Masbir, is because Bizman Shimshon Nechdoi Shel Avimelech was still Kayim, and the only reason why Shimshon started up with him because Yachel, because Huchla Shvua, because they were Moishel and Klal Yisrael. Rashi in Sefer Shmuel that we read before, Rashi says that until David HaMelech came, which was 60, 70 years later, the Nechdei was Kayim, and that's why they weren't capturing the P'lishtim till then. So there seems to be a steer in Rashi, historical steer. Is it, do we know, is it that Bizmanei Shel Shimshon Hagibor, was it the time that the Nechdei was Kayim? That's what it seems from this Rashi in Saita. And therefore the Shvuah is intact. It's not expired yet. The credit card is still working of the Shvuah of Avram and Yitzchak. The only thing is that since there was a Shvuah, and the Shvuah is a bilateral Shvuah, and the P'lishtim started up to be Shoilet and Moishel and Klal Yisrael, therefore Shimshon has a heter to start up with him. Rashi in Sefer Shmuel says that no, until David came, then the Einik was still around, and therefore you weren't allowed to capture them. And the only reason why by David, because in the sight of David is Nilchemu b'Plishtim Meidav. Bema says in Saita on the side there is a Tesis Shantz, and I would like to read the Tesis Shantz in Saita in Daf Yud. Nire shechelek al pirish Rashi b'Sefer Shmuel shoisa yevusi hoya mizare shel Amalek Avimelech v'lo yochel lo yirisha mipnei hashvuah v'yakosev al atzlomim elo keman de'oma b'pirkei Rabbi Lezer shechoisem oyolem shenosan Avrom lohem shelokach meoras hamachpelah ועל שם העיר ניקרו יבוסי משום בביתייסס הראש ושמה אף על פי שהוכלו בימי שמשון מכל מקום לא יבואו עליהם אל בימי דוד. He's noticing the steer. I would maybe at the end of today's shiur would focus on the first teretz, but I'd like to take the second teretz with the Teises Harosh. He brings down B'Shem the Rosh. אף על פי שהוכלו כבר בימי שמשון לא באו עליהם עד Bimei David. What's the pshat in the Rosh? Be'emes started b'Shimshon, but it didn't leibo aleim ad Bimei David. I'd like to, there's a Chuvas HaRosh in Klal Zion, and the Rosh says, and I would like to read the Rosh first. Asher sha'alta al tzibur sheitilu chem v'yitnu shelo yasu ator v'lo yator la'ator ad seif ha'olam. Kasafti b'Chuvas Shaila shetzorich ledak tegmau din charomes שהכל מלא ומתיר בשרויצים בלוי פסח באתור ובלוי יוחד מומחה או גימל ידיוטס אם יש להם דין נדורים וחרומים איך פושטו שגוגו זו בכל תפוצס או גוילו בספרד ובצורפס ובכל הארוצס שעובדתי דובר שתינויקס של בני רבן יוידים הוא אינו מייכל אבל אחרים מייכלים לו אלא על כוח הכן הציבור מכוונים לחרם או לשבוע למנדים אחרים כל שיאמר על גזירוסם כחרמו של אוכון וכאיד גזירו עזרו יחם כל רכושי. אפילו אם הזכיר הציבור לו שישבו, אין די טוב אלו לנדס ולאחרים כל מה שעל גזירוסם. לכן מצינו בפילגש בגיבו, לכסיב כי השבוע הגדול לא איסו לאשר לא יאולו. ותונה בילמדנו וכי שבוע איסו, אלא לא למדכו שאחרם הוא השבוע והשבוע האחרם. וכן שבוע הסדובי, ששור לא איסו אלא גזירו, מייבל על גזירוסם. וכן שבוע ישוע ביריחו לא איסו אלא גזירו ונידן. די אפשר, this is the Rosh Hashanah. להשביע את הנוילודים לאחר זמן, אבל נידוי בכם חל על הדוירס הבוים. נמצא, הדוירס הבוים הכל שהחרימו לקיים גזירוסם והחרימו וכל של יעשו התורו, אחר כך יתירו אחרים נכשלו בהתורו זו. The Rosh says very clear and precise. Shvuah, you cannot make a Shvuah should be effective in the future. Shvuah is right now, whatever is chal in the Shvuah right now. Tomorrow, the Shvuah of Avram to Avimelech Lenina Lenechti was a cherem. A cherem could be L'Deiros Aboim. Now, the Shvuah of Avram Avimelech steht doch Kloli Shoveli Belikim, and steht Vayomer Avram Anechi Yishaveh, and also by Yitzchak says Tina Olo Beini Ubeina Ischa, and Olo Zoktrashi and Olo Leloshin Shvuah. So be'emes Avram and Avimelech could not be mashbia the deiros aboim because efshel lashbia an eilodim lachasman. I cannot make a shvuah on a kid that wasn't born yet, right? If from deswegen it says a Klal Yisrael l'deiroseim kept the bris, is because of the cherem, not because of the shvuah. Cherem and nidui could be chal l'deiros. Therefore, if we're going to look at it, there is a fundamental, Kveger in Shulchan Aruch says, fundamental chiluk between shvuah and cherem. The shvuah, the halacha is, if one of the tzdadim breaks the shvuah, so mimele the hutra shvuah even on the sheni. Often the halacha Shulchan Aruch. If I make a shvuah with you, you make a shvuah with me, and you break the shvuah is automatically bilaterally expired. By cherem is that since it's not only beini lebeincha, cherem can be everlasting for future generations. So you could be meichel on the deiros aboim, even though one of the tzdadim was mefer the cherem, but the cherem is not huto. Klap whoever was mefer the cherem, klapov at that time, so you're not mechuyev to mekayim, you're part of the cherem. But klape whoever wasn't made for the cherem, since the cherem is going on the next generation, and the next generation, because we made a cherem for 300 years, there's no restriction that ein a cherem chalal anilodim. Cherem is chalal anilodim, so therefore it will be theirs. So what you have to say is, in the time of Shimshon, be'emes the P'lishtim was hefer sacherem, and mitzad that be'emes Shimshon had the heter, because if at that time this P'lishtim are made for the cherem, so Shimshon has the right to be kovish them, and he started up with them. But the cherem is not expired, legabe the tite of Shmuel, Shaul, David, which are the next generation 67 years later, and therefore be made David when the P'lishtim were in Moishel and Klal Yisrael, so the cherem was kayim. Says Rashi, the reason why David from Deswegen captured that Migdal Yavusi is because the generations were not kaim. So even the cherem was lenini or lenechti. Ha'olam Michoel now. There was a shvuah. The shvuah was expired because, says the Rosh, according to the Rosh Al Kopanim, as I state in Shulchan Aruch, and a shvuah cholal al yolodim. But in the shvuah was incorporated also a bris and a cherem and a nidui. That is something which could have a future effectiveness, and it was effective for the next Nini Unonechdi. It was in the time of Yeshua, it was in the time of Shoftim. Bizman of Shimshon, I'm just going according to that Mahalach. Bizman of Shimshon, B'yesoidoi, the Cherem was Hutar, Aklape, this particular time, Tkufa and era, and therefore Hu Yachel Hashiv Yisrael, because of Meichel, not Meichel the Shvuah. The Shvuah was never there at the time of Shimshon, according to this Rosh. But actually, what the Rosh says, that it started, but it wasn't implemented legamre till Yemei David. The Kavana is in the Tzeit from Shimshon was Huchal the Cherem, because there's a bilateral Cherem. If you're not Mekayim, I'm not Mekayim. But tomorrow, for my son, for next generation, it's still around. Why? Because the Nechta shall have Avimelech, for some reason or another, till the time of David. And the reason why he has to say that David was, even though in the time of David the word Cheperai from the P'lishtim, yet the Cherem, now he can go ahead and conquer the Migdal Yavusi, because at that time, the Shvuah, which we call the Shvuah, which is in essence the Cherem, expiring, because even the cherem they said lanini lanechdi, and at that time they're not mechuyev anymore. So what the Rosh says in Shema for pishu huchlo b'mei Shimshon lebo alem b'mei David, it says even though the cherem was hufar b'mei Shimshon, and therefore Shimshon shepherded with them, but lo eferu legamre lebo alem legamre ad David means to say because by David there was an expiration, because chronologically this Einikel was died at the time of David. The problem is, this is all fine and dandy. The problem is that here we're coming in, beginning of Sefer Yehoshua. And the state befers, Kadosh Baruch Hu is telling him to mechalek the oretz. He says, I want you to conquer. And what does he tell him to conquer? Zoi Sorotzkin should call Glilis Apishtim. And all the Chamesh Esan, the Pisha Hazosia, Ashnoidi, Ashkeloni, Agita, Akroni, Aovim, tells him it's Tzivui to capture. So, and if we look weiter in Sefer Shoftim, in the beginning of Sefer Shoftim, right after the death of Yeshua, steht Vayilkoid Yehuda ves Azo ves Gvulo ves Ashkelon ves Gvulo ves Ekre ves Gvulo. We know, till now we learned, this is Klor and Deitlich, that the Shvuah, Cherem, whatever you want to call it, of Avimelech was still Kayom at the time of Yeshua, and certainly at the time of Yeshua, which did not actually conquer, but afterwards, this is already the end of Yeshua, Zokim Babayomim. The 2 or 3 years later, Bnei Yehuda are going and they're attacking and they're conquering Azar and Ashkelon and Ekron, all those Shtetlach, which is Shiurei P'lishtim, whilst Niniv and Echdi is still Kayom. How are the Mefer, the Bris, and Avram and Yitzchak? But the truth of the matter is, if I look at Sefer Shoftim, in Perek Aleph, in Pasuk of Aleph, it says, "V'sayevusi yoish veYerushalayim lo yorishu bnei Binyamin, vayeshev hayevusi is bnei Binyamin b'Yerushalayim ad hayoyim hazeh." This is Yerushalayim. Says Rashi, "Mochoiz hoyo b'Yerushalayim, sheshmo Yevusi, umibnei Avimelech hoyu, v'lo yorishu bnei Hashvu ad shebadovi lefi she'adayin nechdo kayom, v'unish bo lo yolonino yolonechte." Also hier steht in Rashi in the beginning of Sefer Shoftim and in Radak. Steht in Rashi, they didn't capture the Yevusi. Why? Because the Shvuah Avimelech is still Kayim. So how do they get a tzivui to conquer Shiurei P'lishtim? What is the difference between Yerushalayim, the Migdal Yevusi, which Bnei P'lishtim dwelled there, and the Shiurei P'lishtim, which was called Shiurei P'lishtim? It wasn't Yenim's Nachlo, which were the headquarters of P'lishtim, Azar, Ashkelon, Ekron, Ashdod, all those Shtetlach. But if you look at Rashi very carefully, Rashi says about Yerushalayim, Umibnei Avimelech hoyu. Rashi doesn't say P'lishtim hoyu. He says Mibnei Avimelech. Weist ois that the Shvuah that Avram and Yitzchak made, Lenina Lenechdi, wasn't on the whole Ummah of P'lishtim. Only on Zarei of Avimelech. And Yerushalayim was, the Einiklach, the skinder of the Einiklach of Avimelech lived in Yerushalayim. In Sha'ar Orim, Ashdod, Azor, Ashkelon, Ekron, Gos, all those states, says Bnei P'lishtim, they were people with P'lishti citizenship. They had a P'lishti passport, but they weren't Bnei. So in Mele, there is no problem because the Shvuah was not on them. That's what we have to say. So what we're saying is right now that the fact that we find that there is a tzivui to capture Shiurei P'lishtim, and there is a tzivui by Yeshua, and there is a avla, Zoisoros Anisheres, and Bnei Yehuda do conquer them, is because the Shvuah of Avram and Avimelech, and Yitzchok and Avimelech, was only intact to Bnei Avimelech, to the Zera of Avimelech, and they were there, and therefore Bnei Yerushalayim, when Yehuda captures, in the same breath that he captures Ashkelon and Azor, it says Lo Yochlu Ad Hayom Hazeh, and then that it says Rashi, because it was Bnei Avimelech v'Nechdei Kayom. Hemoyo Me'ato. All the Shiurei P'lishtim, there was never a Shvuah on. Therefore, there is a tzivui by us. And later on, actual conquering of Bnei Yehuda, this Orim of P'lishtim. The Chelek, there is Mochois, this region, business class region, where Avnei Bnei Einiklach, the Rebbe Einiklach dwelled next to this Migdal HaYevusi, which is called Yevusi only because of Bnei HaYevusi. It was called not because of the Shevet HaYevusi, but because of Yevus, that was the name of it, but Be'emes P'lishtim lived there. Over there, they weren't, they were Einiklach of Avimelech, and therefore they could not go ahead and capture it Ad Hayoyim Hazeh till the Tkufa of David, where they actually died, and the Shvuah and the Einiklach of Avimelech expired. If I'm looking at the Medrash Rabbah in Bereshis, it says, and the Parsha of Avimelech, steht in Medrash, Ve'ato yishovel li be'elekim im tishkali l'nil l'nechdi, Omar Rav Yosef bar Chanina, Ksi ve'oivi chai matzu, ma shenitan la'Avrom l'sheva dairois, nitan la'Avimelech le'shloisha. Loma lo inocham elikim derech eretz P'lishtim, ki adayin nech doikayo. So, I mean, the Medrash is talking about the Nocham elikim derech eretz P'lishtim. We just said in the very nice Torah that the Kibush of P'lishtim was because the P'lishtim are not included in the shiur. And the whole problem is Yerushalayim. And that's what Bnei Yevusi, that's why Bnei Yehuda don't conquer Yerushalayim until the time of David. But Sh'ara Orim there is no. Here in the Medrash, Tetoch Nishtazeh. Why? Because it says that the reason why V'lenocham Lakim Derech Eretz P'lishtim Ki Korovu, what is Ki Korovu, says the Medrash? Adayin Nech Dokayim. You can't go through that. What's Eretz P'lishtim? Eretz P'lishtim is this region that we're talking about. And Shteitoch, that there is. So even if we're going to say that the Shvuah was only on Zaroi of Avimelech, but apparently the Zaroi of Avimelech did not locate themselves only next to this Migdal Letzin or Ayevusi, but they dwelled in the entire Eretz P'lishtim. That's why. So what you have to say, Behechach, the Malbim and the Netziv go in this very same Mahalach, that in the beginning, when the P'lishtim, which we spoke about where they stem from, they really lived in the Bnei Avimelech, in the Tkufa of Yetzias Mitzrayim, lived all over Eretz P'lishtim. Because the Zayde had given Dalton in Grar, which is one of the Ori P'lishtim in that western southern region. And Avdoshte, that was Taka Bnei Avimelech. But later on, in a later Tkufa, there is they moved into Yerushalayim, and Mimele, in the time of Yeshua, at that time already, they moved. We saw it before last year that they moved away from Eretz P'lishtim and they went specifically to dwell in Yerushalayim. So what we have over here is like this: the tzivui of the Shvuah, which is either Shvuah or Cherem, was only on Zar Shel Avimelech, wherever they are. The different kufas that they lived in different shtet, like in the Zeit of Yetzias Mitzrayim, they still the Cherem and the Shvuah because Zar Shel Avimelech dwells there. And in the time of, once we come to Sefer Shoftim, there is a tzivui to conquer it because the Avimelech people moved to Yerushalayim, and therefore they conquered all the Orei P'lishtim because there's no tzivui on them, and therefore they only had a problem with Yerushalayim. This is one mahal I would like to say another vort, another mahalach. Rashi in the pasuk leisuch alechu b'sharecha. Rashi in Parshas Rei. Rashi brings the sifri that we read before. The word leisuchal, I can't, could also mean I could, but I am not allowed to do it. Kayotze boy. V'esayivusi yoshu Yerushalayim lo yochlu bnei Yehuda lo yerishim yecholim hoyu elo she'enom rashoim. And here is Rashi. Listen to this. There's a new dimension. Lefi shekoras lehem Avrom bris shelokach mehem me'oras hamachpelah. When Avram came to bury Sarah me'oras hamachpelah, he was koros a bris. V'lo yevusim hoyu elo chitim hoyu elo al shem ha'ir sheshmo yevus. Kach mefurash בפרקי דרב אלעזר, והוא שנאמר עם הסירחו העבר והפיסחים צורס שכוסף להם השבוע. Totally different shvuah. We're not talking about Avram and Avimelech. We're talking about there's another shvuah. This is Rashi Alateri. In Parshas Rashi brings the Pirkei Reb Elazar. A new Pirkei, a new Medrash, a new Shita, that the shvuah, Avram was koros bris when he came and took the Me'oras HaMachpelah. And that is not Yevusim, that's Chitim, that they call themselves Al Shem Ha'ir Yevus, okay? And that is the reason why he is not breaking the shvuah. You know, if you look at the Rambam says the Taina of Kibush Yochid, the Rambam says Arotz Shekoves David, Ram Naraim, Ram Tzoyv, it's called Kibush Yochid. Why is it Kibush Yochid? So the Rambam says Loma Yodu Mimaylos Eretz Yisrael. The Rambam Bevus the Rambam, we spoke about the Rambam Kibush Yochid in the beginning of Hilchos Trumas. The Rambam says why? מפני שכובש עשם קודם שיכבוש כל ארץ ישראל, אלא נשאר בו מ7 עממים. ואילו תופס כל ארץ כנען לגבולסה, ואחר כך כובש הרוצס האחרס, או יו כיבוש כולו כארץ ישראל לכל דוב. אז זה שתי רמב"ם. And the Rambam's Bekor is a Sifri, Vesayevusi, Somach L'Yerushalayim, Omar Kodesh Baruch Hu, Somach L'Paltin L'Kovashto. That's why it's called Kibush Yochid, because you're supposed to kovish the Zion Amomim first, and you weren't. David went to spread his exuberance up north to Syria. Fragan Ale, all the Meforshim asking the Kasha, starting from the Neder B'Yehuda through Reb Kiveger, everybody asked the Kasha. The fact that David did not kovish the Yevusi is no raya that it's Zion Amomim. Tzorich Chiyan sagt Reb Kiveger. Yevusi em tzetzoim shel P'lishtim, she'einam Zion Amomim. Where does the Rambam see that there is a taina on David? He wasn't kovish Zion Amomim. The fact he went to, because he wasn't kovish Somach Lepaltura, he's talking about the Migdal Yevusi. The Migdal Yevusi wasn't kovish because he had a Vush Tetep Savard, because he was missing. This is not the Yevusi, it's a Migdal. He was pleased to live there, and he wasn't kovish because he had a Shvur. Okay. According to the Pirkei Rabbi Elazar, that Rashi brings down in Parashas Re'eh, state that the reason why he wasn't kovish the Yevusi is not the Shvur of Avram to Avimelech, but the Shvur of Avram to Bnei Ches. Bnei Ches, Rabbi Kiveger says, I am Pirkei Rabbi Elazar, he sends us to Pirkei Rabbi Elazar, that they were the Zion of Bnei Ches was the Chitim, and the Chitim were from the Zion Amomim. And therefore, the reason why he wasn't kovish is not because the Shvur of Avram to Avimelech, but there is a shvua of Me'oras HaMachpelah to the Chitim, which is the Yevusim, which is the Zion Amomim. And Moya Me'ato comes out of Pele, because we would like to make peace between all the Midrashim. There were two shvuas. The one shvua of Avram to Bnei Ches in the Yevusi, and that was from Zion Amomim, because the Chiti was the Zion Amomim. This shvua has any expiration. It's Kaim Lo'ilam Void. Shvuah, Cherem, whatever you want to call it. A vow, a neder, a shvuah, that was Kaim Lo'ilam Void. Another shvuah of Avram Tavimelech, which was in Tishka Lila Nina Lanechti, which was only Kayom for 3 days. This shvuah of Avram Tavimelech was only to Zaroi Shel Avimelech. It was Kayim B'divrei B'zmana Shel Yeshua, and that's the Rashi by us, the Rashi Sefer Sheftim. Machmas, it came to David, Machmas the shvuah expired. Why? Chronologically, the Einikel from Avimelech died. Okay? But, I have another problem. There's another Shvuah, another Neder, which doesn't have expiration date. The Neder of Bishas Me'oras HaMachpelah. And that Neder is Kayim Lo'ilam Voed. And therefore, David does not have any heter to be and go and conquer the Migdal Yevusi because he was Nishba. And that's the Zion Amim of the Rambam. The Rambam is specifically saying that Taina David was Samuch L'Pal Torah is because he wasn't kovish the Zion Amomim. Okay? I'd like to read the Pirkei Rabbi Elazar, Perek Lamidei, Omar L'bnei Yevusi Liknis Mehem, Me'oras HaMachpelah, B'mecher Toiv, B'zov, B'ksav, L'kevel Achuz HaSoilom, fragt the Pirkei Rabbi Elazar, V'richi Yevusi Moyu, V'alochiti Moyu, Ela Ir Yevus Nikro Yevusim, V'lekiblu Aleim, Itru Korea Mushtachave, Sheneema, Omru, Anu Yoidim Shakodesh Baruch Hu, Omru! On Yoidim Shakodesh Baruch Hu Osid Lit L'chol L'zachos Kol Ha'arotz Yisrael Kroisim on Yishvua Shen Yisrael Yoshim Es Ir Yevus Ki Im Bertzoinam ואחר כך קונו אז המכפלו במחר זוב ובכסבר לאחוז הסוילום. מה עשו אנשי יבוס? עשו צלמן לחוישס והעמידו עשם ברחוי ועיר וכוסר משבועס אברום וכשבו ישראלרוץ להיכנס בעיר היבוס לא יוכל מפני בריס אברום שנאמר ועשה יבוסי יויש וירושלים לא ירישו בישראל וכשמולך דוד ביקש להיכנס לעיר היבוס ולא יניח מויסה וכמו שנאמר ויאמר לדוד לא יסוב העין. It comes out like this. In the Zman of Yeshua they couldn't capture because of the Shavuos Avimelech. After Yeshua, Bizman David is over, and David could have captured. And this is only Klapi Yerushalayim because it was Muchzekes Bidei P'lishtim, which is Oisei Mochois that was Bibnei Ches. He couldn't capture that Mochois. Why? Because of the Shavuot of Bnei Ches. Therefore, if you look at the end of Sefer Shmuel, you see that David bought the Goyren Arven or Yevusi Bekesef Mole. For that, you could buy. When Rashi says, Ein Charashoi, Rashi in Parshas Re'eh, Rashi says, Shefishekoras Avrom Bri Shelokach Me'oras HaMachpelah, Rashi is talking about Lo Yisuchal. Leisuchal is the everlasting Iser. The everlasting Iser is something which is the Shvua of the Yevusi in Me'oras HaMachpelah, which was everlasting. Stop here.